Hi guys, Konstantin here. Today we're going to have a quick chat about what is GPU bottlenecking and CPU bottlenecking, how we can measure it, how can we measure it, and how can we improve it slightly, and how to avoid it. That's the most important thing. In order to do this, I have tested two configurations. One which I deliberately created to be with a bottleneck, and one which I have paired it so there is no bottlenecking. And for that, I want to show you what the difference is, how to measure it, and we're going to have a quick chat about avoiding it and how to basically improve it if we do have it in our system, because there are ways of improving it. So first of all, let's have a chat about what GPU bottlenecking or CPU bottlenecking is. So the definition that I found online by asking AI, it says, and I'm going to just read it to you and then we're going to interpret it. So it says basically, GPU bottlenecking is a situation where the GPU is unable to operate at its fullest potential. The same for works for the CPU. So basically, related to gaming only. So we're going to have a chat basically mostly on gaming. So if you're building a computer and you're on a budget and you're not quite sure how to get the components, or someone gives you a really cheap component but it's like really really good. The thing is, you might create bottlenecks by pairing very fast, let's say very fast GPUs with a slower CPU. Let's say one of your friends has a I don't know, 5900 Ryzen 5900 or an Intel 12 series, 10 series CPU that you just have lying around. They decided to give it to you with the motherboard and RAM. So basically, all you're gonna do is just buy yourself a nice GPU, and you go to the store, you buy a very powerful GPU because let's say you saved up some money. And when you come home, you notice that the GPU doesn't seem as powerful as you thought. Well, that's probably because and most likely because the CPU is a bit slow and the CPU can't keep up with the GPU. So basically, the CPU can't feed the GPU with enough data or frames, in our case, to perform at its full capacity. This is a very common occurrence. There's also a case where you have such as in my case, you have like a very strong CPU and you've got like a very weak GPU. In that case, the CPU basically renders frames a lot faster than the GPU, but and it ends up just sitting there and waiting for the GPU to catch up. This case is not that onerous. You can live with it. It's basically, I think professionals and people that don't buy GPUs for gaming, they probably can live with this. It's not recommended if you want to build a PC just to enjoy games. It's a bit of a Frankenstein creation, but yeah, if you want to avoid it, I can show you how to avoid it. It's not very rocket science or anything like that. There's a ton of other videos out there. I just brought it up because obviously, as new CPUs and GPUs are currently on the market, people are thinking about either building a new PC or renewing their current PCs, upgrading and such and such. So that's important, because if you're upgrading, and let's say you want to buy a GeForce 40 series because they might have really good prices lately, especially 4080s, 4090s, something like that. You might find them at a very good deal. But your system is like 5-6 years old or something like that, because that's how old it is. And you're only thinking, oh, I'm just going to upgrade the GPU. I'm going to buy a 4080. It's going to really, really improve my performance. It will improve your performance, but it might not be the best GPU and the optimal GPU for you to buy based on bottlenecking. As you can notice, by pairing a Ryzen 9950X with a RK770, the CPU frame time is approximately a third of the GPU frame rendering time. So the CPU is about 7 milliseconds on average, and the GPU varies, so from 20 to 30 milliseconds. By looking at it, I can clearly and straight away say that the GPU is the bottleneck here. So the CPU is a lot faster. It renders the frame, it finishes its job for each frame and goes to the next, while the GPU still struggles to finish rendering the frame, so it takes longer than the CPU. In this case, the GPU becomes the bottleneck. There's not much you can do in this case. There are ways to treat this, but as you can clearly say, you can easily create a bottleneck and look at it by having just any tool, basically any benchmark, any game that supports this. So as you can see the result, it clearly states here that the bottleneck is the GPU, and I've purposely made it so it's that's 100%. So basically, as you can see, the CPU rendering frames is 150 on average, and the GPU is 50. So the CPU renders frames basically 3 times faster than the GPU. So there's ways to go around that, and I'm going to show you a case next where there is no bottleneck. Now we have a much more balanced configuration here. So we have a high-end CPU and a high-end GPU. As you can notice, the rendering times for the CPU and GPU are very close to each other, within a millisecond apart. The GPU is slightly faster than the CPU in this case, which means there's a bit more headroom. So you can clearly see that for a much more balanced configuration, the bottleneck is basically gone. So as fast as my CPU works, my GPU can counterbalance it as well. This is where you should aim when building a PC, to eliminate any bottlenecks. As you can see, throughout the whole benchmark, the rendering times are very close to each other. That means that you can fully utilize your GPU, because your CPU can keep on feeding it with frames. So this is the benchmark, this is the configuration. You do have some bottlenecking here, but I don't know how exactly they calculated 30 and 70%. But basically, if you look at the numbers of frames rendered, they sort of like match 158 with 146. You can never have it on par. You could probably very rarely have it on par. But basically, this is how a normal build should look like. So yeah, you would consider this, because obviously if you do avoid bottlenecking, you basically spend your money wiser, better. And if you're building a PC from scratch, yeah, and you avoid pairing bad CPU with a fast GPU or vice versa, you can end up having a better build. So without going around it too much, the cases we're going to look at today is, as I said, we're going to have, because that's the best I could create, I don't have any very weak CPUs. The best I could create for you is a very strong CPU and a weak GPU, and a very strong CPU and a very fast GPU as well, and I can show you the differences. Now, in terms of going around this, if you want to go around bottlenecking, there's a couple of things you can do by just looking at what actually happens. So what happens when I'm going to take the GPU bottlenecking, for example, where the GPU cannot catch up with the CPU. So if you have a strong CPU and a very weak GPU, and you notice that you've got bottlenecking with the tools that you can find online, or you just do the test I did, I'll show it to you in a moment. If you pair them together and you notice that, let's say you do have that bottlenecking, the GPU can't catch up with the CPU, basically what you can do is start looking at adjusting the time it takes for the GPU to render that frame. And you can do that by basically lowering the resolution or enabling one of these upscaling technologies, depending on what you got. So if you got an NVIDIA card, DLSS, or whatever upscaling you got, just like NVIDIA upscaling or something. NVIDIA also works with AMD upscaling, FSR, various technologies of FSR. If you've got ARC card, which I'm currently testing today, you can use Intel XESS. So by enabling upscaling, the GPU renders the frames at a lower resolution, which means it does it faster, and uses the upscaling technology to basically create the whole frame. By doing that, it takes less time to do it, and it can actually increase the frame rate. So if you want to use a bit of an upscaling technology, lower the resolution or lower the graphics settings, you can actually reduce bottlenecking. Not by much, you're still gonna have it, but it is improved. There's obviously so many cases of doing this. I'm not gonna go through them right now, but you simply just try it. So if you do notice you've got bottlenecking, and if you do notice that the GPU is the bottleneck, so as I said, strong CPU, weak GPU, you can get around it by changing the graphics settings, resolution, or enabling upscaling technology. Obviously, in doing this, the only gain that you make is but you get more frames per second generated. So this is applicable when you've got like when you're playing an FPS game, you want more frames. You know you've got a weak GPU, you know your CPU can do it, you've just done a test. Okay, change those things, you might get more frames out of it. This is the only case I'm thinking. Yeah, so I think we've covered pretty much all the basics here. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you find this video useful. If you've got any more questions or you think I've said some silly things, just put them in the comments. Hit subscribe if you like it. Anyways, guys, cheers.